Welcome, Big Sky School District students and Greater YouTube. Our assignment is to design, build, and document in a video a simple box. This is the start of my version. Yours will be different. Be creative. As you'll see, it might not be quite so simple, but I know you got it. Let's go! Every good project for me starts with a little coffee. So while I go fetch some, we can look at the drawing I did, this first sketch of the box that I was planning on making. Tasty. Good coffee. Next, I jumped onto Fusion 360 and built all the different elements of my box. This software is really nice because once you model it, you can see how all the different joints and intersections are going to work. You can see that recessed area I made on the bottom so that the bottom of my piece could lay flat inside of the outer walls of the box. You can also see that I made these nice mitered corners and how that bottom piece fits into the project. Then I took my 3D design plan and transferred it into the 2D design view. Here now I can create 2D plans detailing all aspects of my project. Adding dimensions to the objects will keep your build on track in the wood shop. Here are those final plans. Next thing I did was lay out the boards I'm going to use and figure out where I'm going to put the different pieces. This way I can avoid the knots in the boards or any blemishes and make sure that they are going to work for my project. I additionally noticed that some of these boards weren't square, and we're going to worry about that in a minute with the joiner. But before we do that, I had to put on some PPE. Don't forget those glasses and ear protection when you're using these tools. So next I headed over to the joiner, and this machine is where I can run through the long pieces before I've cut them down to side and make sure I've got one perfectly square edge. As you can see, I plane through the one side, and then with the back of the piece against the fence of the device, it creates this perfectly square cut. Here you can see running it through in the other direction. Now we've got a perfect 90-degree angle on one side of the piece, and so I planed both sides in order to make sure it's nice and smooth. Notice here to make sure your piece is clean before you start using it in these tools, because any staples like that could get flung out of the machine. Next thing I want to do is create the mitered edges of my piece. So I head to the table saw and set the 45-degree angle, and then I go set the fence to the right width for each of my pieces. Once that's done, I'm going to run this through in both directions, both sides, to get that nice 45-degree miter cut. Theoretically, you could cut these down and use them on the chop saw to do this, but the table saw makes a much more accurate cut to width. The piece is going to be a lot harder to put together if not all four sides are perfectly square and the exact same dimensions. So that's why we use the table saw for this. You can see I got a little creative on some of my video pieces for this video. I think that's kind of fun. Next I moved to the chop saw and I removed any blemishes in the piece. You can see a crack in the end of that. We're not going to be able to use that. That won't work well. And then I marked and made sure I could get my 4 sides out of this piece, avoiding knots and any other blemishes in the wood. Back to the table saw, here's where I'm cutting them to the perfect width. Yet again, the chop saw got me close, but this table saw with the fence guide to make sure I'm getting the exact same measurement for all 4 of my sides. Next I went to the drum sander. Here's where I could make perfectly smooth sands to get them not only smooth, but to the exact same thickness. Yet again, if all 4 pieces are the same and dimensionally, they'll fit together much better. Be careful when you're using this. I made a mistake and I forgot the one time I put one of the pieces through to not make the grain go the direction, the sanding go in the same direction as the grain. And you can see in that first photo that it going against the grain makes a cross mark, and then when you do it with the grain, it's a much smoother sanding. Then I routed out, although I did it with a rabbet cut, you can do it either way, the bottom so that I could recess that bottom piece into the box. Since I'm going to use the domino joiner to put my sides together, the next thing to do was to line them up and then put lines in the middle, 2 different lines, equally measured across so that the dominoes would line up. Then I'm going to take the domino joiner, I'm going to make sure it's lined up with that line, and I'm going to make my cuts, 2 for each side of each piece, a total of 16 domino cuts. Again, the marking of all this is incredibly important because they need to line up in order to get your perfectly square box. There you have it. One thing I noticed in mine that I kind of wish I had done differently is I didn't leave space for the glue. So you notice this one in the middle is a little bit wider, which allows for expansion when you put the glue in with the domino. And on the joiner itself, you use this selector to decide how big the hole's going to be. Furthest to the left means it just fits in there snug, which is good for lining things up. And then middle and the far right version leaves a lot more space for glue, which makes for a stronger product. So I'd recommend using a combination of these sizes, a couple to line it up perfectly that are snug, and then an additional one that leaves some room for the glue to make for a stronger joint. Here they are all lined up and ready to be put together. And so I did a mock put together where I put all the pieces together, made sure they lined up, including the bottom. This was before gluing. Now it's time to glue. And you see I put some glue into those domino joints, and I shouldn't have, given they had no room to expand. If you make some that can expand, put glue in the ones that will. And then I pressed it all together, lined it all up, did some cleanup to make sure it didn't stick. Notice I'm using a temporary board, something that's waste, so I don't get glue on our nice workbenches. Then I clamped things together, putting in the base, make sure everything's nice, snug. Then you can clean out that excess glue. The more you clean out now, the less sanding you're going to have to do. But I had some sanding to do, so I made a nice smooth pass once the glue had dried. Then I headed to the router because I wanted a nice rounded edge on all 4 sides of the box. Nice smooth passes. once I had all my videos together, I went into the editing booth and did some work with Adobe Premiere. One thing I did during this was make sure that I organized all my files ahead of time and named them so that I knew what I was hunting for as I put my video together. There you have it. A nice box. Clean, square, rounded edges, a nice recessed base. Stay tuned for part 2, where I'm going to make the top, stain this, add some finished details, and finish this project. Good luck with your project.